Everyone hold on your horses. Before we start actually ranking the episodes, I would like to talk more about one of the most interesting questions that this season didn't answer, that being this voting right here. I can bet that most of you when watching the first episode of the season, you had no idea that there even was a voting, as the finale of the first season didn't have anything like that. So what happened? Well, allow me to explain to you all in details what happened. On February of 2012, on Carrie's channel, a voting was held, with all these characters having a chance to join the second season of BFDI. You can see that there's a wide choice of characters here, as we have all the 20 original contestants, the 30 recommended characters, and even a couple of extra new characters added to the mix. The video allowed you to vote 20 times, so you could either choose 20 characters from this wide selection, or you could vote the same person 20 times to ensure that they might join the season, and this was the only time in the entire series where they allowed you to vote for more than one person, which is crazy considering Teapot doesn't even do that, despite always having 2 teams up for elimination every episode. But anyways, this is how we ended up with the votes that we saw on BFDIA 1. However, that doesn't answer all questions, because yes, there's a lot of stuff to be brought up. For example, how come Yellowface isn't in this selection, but somehow was in the first episode of the season? And even more, how did he get so many votes despite not even being in the selection? Well, the fun thing is that Yellowface wasn't originally supposed to be in BFDIA, he was pretty much just planned to be the one guy that makes ads, besides Blocky of course, but there were many people that wanted Yellowface to compete. These Yellowface voters were so many that not only did that make the Huang brothers decide to let him in the voting, but he even got enough votes to actually join the season, which is crazy considering he wasn't even in the selection of people to choose from. That's one question answered, but there's more to this voting than it meets the eye. Another thing that many people may have found odd is that there were 2 characters that were chosen differently from the rest. While everyone else had to gather enough votes to join the season, Golf Ball and Gelatin seem to have both been picked by 2 users, known as InternPony707 and the Grassy Fan. Oh dear God, Grassy had fans all the way back since BFDIA. In any case, the episode never really explained why Golf Ball and Gelatin were treated so differently. Golf Ball didn't have enough votes to join the season, and Gelatin wasn't even an option in the first place. So what happened? From what I've gathered after a couple of research, there was a contest that Carrie held during this time, which was to guess how many comments this video will get by the end of the month. The month goes by, and the winner of this contest ends up being InternPony707, with also the Grassy Fan being selected as a winner, probably getting a tie with them for getting the same answer. So they were both rewarded with getting to choose a character to join the second season. Now I've heard that InternPony originally had the idea of choosing a cowboy hat with a southern accent to join the season, but was later cut due to that being a bad stereotype for the show, but I have no confirmation if that's actually true. In any case, it doesn't change the fact that InternPony ended up choosing Golf Ball to join the season, which was a good call considering she didn't have enough votes to join. As for the Grassy Fan, they decided to not choose an old character, they wanted to have their own original character be featured in the series. And that everyone, is how Gelatin was brought into the world of Battle for Dream Island. There's actually a video still up from the Grassy Fan that showcases Gelatin's first design. So that's the story behind Golf Ball and Gelatin's special attention to join the season. Alright, that's everything I wanted to say before actually ranking every episode of this season. So with that out of the way, we can start with the actual ranking. Oh, and do note that I will include BFDIA+IDFB, I actually sat off the game and played what I could, and watched the rest on some videos, to get an overall idea of the gameplay. With all of that out of the way, let's start the ranking with the first episode of the second season. This episode is difficult to talk about, because things here just kinda happen. There's no apparent connection between the ending of the first season to the opening of this season. Now of course we do know because of BFB 22, but back then no one could really understand this opening. Then there's once again the voting that just kinda happens, we don't get any context about anything, like I'm sure 90% of people don't even know why Golf Ball and Gelatin were handpicked by those 2 users. And the teams that we're left with before the challenge are absolutely unfair, especially when you look at the teams before Donut started complaining, and those teams would have been really cool. There's also to mention that Donut was pretty much set to be eliminated first, considering not only was he really mean in this episode, but he was also paired up with 2 returning contestants, so it was pretty much over from the start for Donut. I will say though that I do want to see Donut possibly rejoining BFDIA, especially considering that Donut just had this complete character shift once BFB happened, going from a really rude guy to a much more likable character. I don't want to say that it was a downgrade, because I really like Donut as of right now, but it wouldn't have hurt to see more of this rude version of Donut. Not to mention that, what actually happened that made Donut go from this?
Let's try to come up with a team name.
Please tell me you did not just say that.
Why?
Just forget it!
Donut, we need a way to identify ourselves.
Whatever!
To this.
We are the greatest team the world has put together! Just look at how far we've come. We've faced enormous challenges, I'm not going to lie. Things have been hard for every single one of us. But when I look at my teammates, I see hope. I see strength. I see ingenuity. Fiery Junior, there's no one quite like you. We can do this.
Yeah!
Like there's no in-universe explanation, so I'm assuming something happened between his elimination in BFDIA and before the start of BFB, but in any case, there's not much to say about this episode. Things aren't really explained to you, so you're kinda left with more questions than anything else, and adding that with also 2 unfair teams and an unfair first and also not very iconic challenge, you pretty much get the worst first episode of the entire series. BFB 1 and Teapot 1 are both one of the best episodes of their respective seasons. BFDI 1 has a lot of charm and nostalgia, and even IDFB 1 is really entertaining. So unless you count BFB 17 as the first episode of the post-split, then BFDI easily takes the crown for having the worst first episode of the series. And to be honest, even BFB 17 isn't like as bad as this episode, so even if that counts it would still lose. 4 out of 10. This second episode really doesn't have much to offer. The elimination was pretty obvious, like I said before. Teardrop joining didn't really affect the overall episode, as she was not even that important to the trio. There's a lot of filler in this episode as well, and even Leafy's new metal look isn't that interesting, so there's not really much to say about this episode. And I would have given this episode a 4 out of 10 just like the first episode, if it wasn't for one thing.
Huh?
BFDI may be the most unoriginal season of the entire series, but the one thing that's really interesting about it is Evil Leafy as a whole. This season uses Evil Leafy so much as a sort of an antagonist to the contestants, in a way that other villains of the series, such as Flower, really couldn't. The difference is that villains like Flower could easily leave the show once eliminated, but Evil Leafy isn't a contestant. She's her own entity, living in the forest, scaring anyone away once too close. And honestly, I really love this concept, the fact that there's always gonna be the chance to come across this entity and that you could even lose control of your body if she got to you. Forget that you might get eliminated, you could actually die if you come across Evil Leafy. And actually, I just realized that this episode mentioned how there's no recovery centers around, meaning that if you die for real. That's the concept that I talked about in the finale of the first season, and how that makes everything be more suspenseful. So I'm actually glad that these first episodes actually don't have any way to come back to life. It makes every death the more impactful, from those that happen on screen, to those that you can spot if you look closely. So you know what, I was originally gonna rank this episode with a 5 out of 10, but the fact that this episode makes Evil Leafy the more threatening because of the recovery centers being no longer a thing, there's an extra layer of fear when you come across Evil Leafy, so this episode gets a 6 out of 10 for that alone. While the second episode had that Evil Leafy moment alongside the fact that people dying was treated more seriously, this episode takes those elements and throws them out of the window. First, Evil Leafy didn't actually kill Spongy, which is lame considering it would have been cool if Evil Leafy could kill characters like that. Apparently she possessed him or something. I'm not sure, but what I'm sure of is that by the end of this episode, Gelatin very casually handles the Evil Leafy situation, so now she's out of the picture, at least for the time being, so that's really lame. And as for the other thing, that being that dying was treated more seriously, this episode's contest basically got many people killed just like that, which made the whole idea also get thrown out of the window. And it's not like the episode's any fun, The only noteworthy thing about this episode is Bubble being brought back to life, which I guess the idea of being dead forever is now also being slowly removed from the list of cool things that this season had going for it. But besides that, there is Bubble telling Match and Pencil that an alliance of 4 or more people will eventually lead to the alliance being destroyed, which is actually what has happened in BFB1, so that's an interesting scene to look at after we've seen FreeSmart dissolve as a whole. As for the rest, there really isn't nothing to say, so this episode gets a 2 out of 10 for throwing out of the window the 2 cool things that this season had. I gotta say that this episode is really good in many ways. For example, this episode introduces us to Golf Ball's underground factory, a location that would be used in every other season after this one as well. I gotta say that the looks of this factory is really cool, makes me wanna build my own, as Golf Ball said. Another thing that's really amazing is that Golf Ball is capable of creating an entire dream island on her own, which makes me wonder why she even wants to compete if she can just make one herself. Maybe it's the pride to beat everyone else in a contest to prove that she's better. Another good thing that this episode brings up is the fact that they actually realize that they're not really battling for Dream Island.
If you haven't seen season 1 yet,
Leafy stole Dream Island from the winner of the season.
just keeping you in the loop, yo.
So then they start to actually talk on why they're even battling, if the prize isn't even there, which did lead to one of the funniest moments of the entire season.
So without Dream Island, we're just battling for nothing?
It's kinda sad though that after this episode, everyone has decided to battle for, whatever the hell this is. Kinda makes the stakes not that high considering this is what everyone is battling for. And as if this episode couldn't get any better, Evil Leafy is back. Seems like the eye start that Gelatin gave her didn't last too long, and she's now possessing Flower. That's gonna be interesting to see where that leads up to, especially considering that the best episode of this season until now was because of Evil Leafy, and they brought her back again. So we're definitely gonna see more of her in the future. So overall, this episode is capable of fixing one of the 2 big issues that the last episode caused, so this episode gets an 8 out of 10. And now we're starting to get to the actual best episodes of this season, BFDI 5, a 5-part special episode that's by far the most entertaining of the whole bunch of episodes we've discussed so far. Starting off the episode, we see Leafy come back, and a surprisingly interested Bubble talking with her. I'm honestly not sure why she started acting like that with Leafy, especially when you take in the many times that Leafy mistreated Bubble last season.
I won't be surrounded by backstabbing friends who take my offer of friendship and my labors of love and just throw them away over their shoulders. You know this time I've been trying to help you and you're not even thankful. Well, I didn't mean to say that. I was right about you. You are the meanest person on earth.
We also get puffball speaker boxes, supposedly so, Death, and speaking of her, why does this season struggle so much with having a decent host? We're at episode 8 and we have yet to reach 4 episodes without the host changing or being replaced, which says a lot about this season not really having a stable host. But anyways, this elimination is by far the most focused one of the entire season so far, to the point where there even was a section where Fury Speakerbox decided to read some comments about the bottom 2 characters. That trend should come back for the newer episodes, not gonna lie, it's fun to see some comments like that in the actual episode. It would definitely make people wanna comment more.
Oh, I wanted Rocky to win. He might have gotten his barf back.
Wait, you want Rocky's disgusting barf back?
Yeah, it was cute, don't you think?
Then after that intense elimination, we got quite possibly the best moment of the entire season by far.
So, are we like a new team now?
You bet.
What should we name ourselves? Revenge! Poopy mayonnaise!
Well, we formed this team so we can have more freedom, right?
Right.
So we should name our team Freedom. But then it sounds like free dumb. And we're not dumb.
We are totally not like dumb. We are so super smart.
Well, then it's obvious what our team should be. Free Snare!
Yeah!
Free Smart is such an amazing team concept, and while it may not be my favorite team ever, that belonging to the strongest team on Earth, this team is definitely a close second. It's definitely really enjoyable to see this alliance be an actual team, because with Free Smart becoming their own team, that means that there's now 3 teams, We may have started really bad with these first two teams, but by episode 5 I can say with confidence that we reached the peak of these teams. Free Smart is a great team like I said. Wobunch has finally become the largest team after being the underdogs for so long.
We're tied for the largest team.
Whatever, it doesn't make a difference. And Team No Name now has the ones that have been on this huge team ever since the first episode, the ones that are sticking in after all this time. After the challenge starts, there's not much else to say, except for one thing. Evil Leafy has once again returned to her evil force to haunt some more people, so she starts chasing the balls and Rocky, and with Free Smart jumping just enough to make it past the canyon, we're then greeted with this.
Oh no, a canyon! What do we do?
If we quickly build a trebuchet, we might be able to...
Now most fans of the season kinda just skipped this middle chapter, and just want to see what happened in BFDIA 5C, or at most, they checked what BFDIA 5B was about, without getting much into the game itself. But we're doing things differently here, as I am going to rank everything that's considered an episode of this series, which does include this game as well. So here let me play this game for a while to see if there's anything relevant that you guys may have missed when first played or heard of this game. Alright, I've come back after beating the first 16 levels of this game, but that 17th level was too hard for me to beat, so I decided to see what happened in terms of story in this game. So let me tell you about everything you need to know about this game in terms of the story and how it connects to the rest of the episodes. Book wakes up inside Evil Leafy after the events of the last episode, but doesn't remember until looking up her journal entries, so she goes to find the other members of Free Smart, the first one being Match, who after being eaten by Evil Leafy, got trapped in a box. After a couple more levels the two find the now broken, but still functional, recovery center, which would be used as a gimmick for the rest of this game's levels. After that Match and Book find a house, which is apparently a house where many recommended characters live, one of them being Lego Brick, who welcomes Book and Match into the house. After that Book and Match are required to use Lego Brick to get across this level, so after first killing him, they sacrificed him to get eternally stuck in the dead end, where he would stay there until he presumably had to die to later get recovered. After that event, Lego Brick is pissed at Book and Match for what they did, so he decides to trap the two of them on his dungeon. Apparently Ice Cube angered Lego Brick as well, as she is also found in this dungeon. After the three of them escape, they find two other recommended characters, Waffle and Toon. Waffle reveals to us that Lego Brick has a huge fear of dying, and that if you did anything like that to him, things would get ugly, which is exactly what we saw just now. After this encounter, Book, Match and Ice Cube finally leave the house and return to the outside of this giant evil leafy maze. Although the game didn't get finished, one can assume that they later found Pencil, Ruby, and Bubble as well. It's unclear whether or not Golf Ball, Tennis Ball and Rocky were supposed to be characters as well, but it is a possibility considering they were also inside Evil Leafy with Free Smart. But in any case, once everyone from Free Smart is saved, they finally manage to get on the exterior of Evil Leafy's skin, as we see in the next episode of the season. So that's everything you need to know about the game. Now, this is gonna be a bit hard to rank, considering this is way different compared to the rest of, pretty much the entire series, as this is the only game that's also considered to be part of an episode, so I think my best go is to rank this based on how creative this is, with also how fun it is to play Trough. Well, I definitely have to say that the idea of making a video game out of an episode is really cool, and this also expands more on the nature of Evil Leafy, as apparently there's a whole population inside her, which is kind of interesting to think about. Although I gotta say that the gameplay, while fun at times, it was for the most part annoying to get Trough, as some levels were really hard to beat. I may not have the patience to get Trough all levels, or maybe I just suck at gaming, but what I do know is that while the concept is pretty cool and the story around this game is nice, the actual gameplay isn't that remarkable or even annoying at times, so I'm gonna give this game a 6 out of 10 overall. This middle chapter of this big episode is definitely one of the weakest ones so far, that's for sure. Most of this episode is to simply explain what happened after the events of the game of 5B, plus they actually killed evil Leafy again. Come on guys, stop killing one of the best things about this season. However, I will give credit to this episode for one thing, that being the first moment where Fries and Puffball started to bond together, which would later in the series make the two of them become pretty much best friends, so that's really cool. Last thing I wanna say about this episode is that I love how dark Needle and Spongy's deaths are. Just look at this.
Don't worry, guys. I've got this covered.
Help me!
I sure miss when deaths in object shows were horrifying. But besides that, not that much else to talk about. 5 out of 10. This episode is kinda like the last episode, in the same way that not much happens, besides the fact that Match here does act a lot more selfish and lazy than she's ever shown to be, which is interesting because we don't actually see much of this side of Match, even in later seasons. And while I may not specifically like this side of Match, since she's not even being funny or entertaining here, it's not bad either. But the one thing that this episode does that makes me mad is the fact that Wobunch thought it would be a great idea to revive Puffball and use her to get to Yoil City. The entirety of Team No Name got killed one way or another, so there was literally zero way for Free Smart and Wobunch to lose this challenge, even if it would have taken days to get Yoil City. This almost made me wanna wish for Wobunch to lose, just because of this idiotic plan they got. But overall I guess the episode wasn't horrible, so I'll settle with a 4 out of 10. Now this is definitely the best episode of the season. So let's talk about why this episode is my favorite one of the bunch. First off, we are finally introduced to Yoil City, which is absolutely the best location of the entire series. Forget the Greenlands, the post-split ruins, or even Teapot's Yellow Lands. Yoil City is filled with so many mysteries that the other locations would dream of having. Like, why is this city even here? Who used to live here? Why is this city abandoned? What happened to make whoever lived here leave? I may be biased because the next season does expand a lot more on Yoil City's story, which I really enjoy. So honestly, props to this episode for introducing the best location of the entire series. Next thing I really like is the fact that there is a lot of tension on who's gonna win, especially during the second half of this episode. It may be because of the music choice, but this entire segment just felt really intense for me.
Every time your team has been up for voting, you've won the prize! Puffball, why'd you stop? We're so close. We have a 99.4% chance of winning. What are you doing?
If our team loses, we'll be up for voting. And I'll win the prize like I always do. I really love prizes.
That's the most insane thing I've ever...
And finally, this episode started to turn Puffball into an amazing character. For the first episodes of the season she was pretty much just the character used to get to long distances, but in this episode here, we started to see Puffball's true emotions and feelings. We can see Puffball craving a lot the satisfaction of having prizes. That on its own isn't that much, but the series would later on turn this obsession over prizes into Puffball craving for attention overall, probably because getting prizes did equal to Puffball being loved quite a lot, so the series later decided to turn Puffball into a character that would do anything to be adored by the many fans that the show has, and by anything, I mean anything, as episodes like this one shows.
I'm just gonna say it, TV. You'll go down as a legend forever for this, because you went above and beyond and didn't do the basic thing. That would have been mediocre.
Not basic, huh? Maybe I could spruce up the ideas for the roller coaster. Drop-offs, sudden cliffs, loops, falls, dangerous, deadly, the most exciting ride ever. And they will all love me. They'll love it.
Honestly speaking, Puffball might be another character that might get a character analysis video, considering that she's a character with a lot of depth overall, so maybe I'll do one after Foldy. In any case, although the season did continue after this, I honestly would have been okay with this being the last episode of the season. This 5-part special episode may have been a bit boring in the middle, but I can say with confidence that the beginning and the ending of this 5th episode are definitely my favorites of this season. With this finale getting a 10 out of 10, being the only episode of the season with a whole 10 as a score. The episode is just really enjoyable to watch, and plot holes wise it's just better to end this season instead of continuing it, but moving on to the next episode. And now we enter the new era of this season, the era that continued the season after 10 years since the last episode. You'd think that the episode would feel really off, especially with the fact that it's been so long, to the point where BFB already ended and Teapot was already pumping a lot of episodes in a very short amount of time. But turns out, the only real thing that's noticeably off is the voice acting.
Not if Rocky gets eaten. That's what you get for barfing on me.
Just stop before I kick you out of Free Smart.
Okay.
But besides that, there's actually no complaints about this episode, and this might be one of the best episodes of the entire season, so let's talk about that. First off, the challenge is pretty fitting considering that the gang decided to live in Yoil City as of this episode, so finding a place to live in is really cool. I just wish that the next episode actually showed each team in their respective sleeping places, to add some continuity I guess. There's also the fact that Ice Cube finally started to get voice lines. Yes, I know that episode release-wise Teapot 5 was the first episode to do so, but this is the first episode in canon in order to do that, so shush. In any case, it was really cool to see Ice Cube show some actual skill after not really doing much in this season besides being part of Free Smart. Hopefully there will be episodes like this one for Ice Cube. And Pencil is also really good here, as someone who really loves Pencil as a whole ever since I've started rewatching the series, and also after the huge absence that Pencil received after being eliminated first in BFB, it was such a nice changing of pace to see her after all this time, and she was pretty much portrayed as the same old Pencil, besides this moment.
You do know the directions, don't you, Pencil?
Don't ask me questions like that, Ruby.
Yeah, I don't know what was that about. Pencil is smarter than this. But yeah, overall pretty much almost the entire cast feels like the same, with no big complaints on that one. However, there's one huge aspect that made me like this episode way more than I probably should, and as you could have guessed by what I said before, you can tell what I'm about to say.
Whoa, what's this?
It's the end of a hallway?
No, Gelatin, this mirror. Why is it here? I'm so curious.
I have no idea, but I think we can learn more information about it by staring at it very closely.
Yeah, Evil Leafy is back once again. At first, I thought it was a bit weird and maybe even fan service, because who in the right mind would actually recover Evil Leafy after the events of last episode? But then I looked at where she spawned, and it all clicked. This wasn't fan service to bring back Evil Leafy without a reason on how she came back, this hotel was the answer all along. You can see that in the halls and rooms that there's a lot of Evil Leafy things, such as a carpet with her, and even a picture of literally Evil Leafy on one room, so this whole hotel smells like it's heavily lore themed. My theory is that this hotel right here is something that was made for Evil Leafy, maybe by an Evil Leafy cult, or maybe by some people that wanted to study this mysterious leaf. But then Evil Leafy actually showed up in this hotel made for her. I could go even further and say that maybe this is the reason why this entire city is abandoned, because maybe this hotel attracted Evil Leafy, to the point where she would start to haunt the entire Yoil City, to the point where everyone fled the place, leaving it to the status where we see it. That's my theory anyway. It might very well be that Evil Leafy herself built this or something like that. But the fun part is just that, we can guess all we want on what the story behind this Evil Leafy hotel is, and coming up with ideas that can help us understand what happened to the citizens of Yoil City is just so fun to do, at least for me. For this reason, and because of the other things I said before, I'm gonna give this episode a solid 9 out of 10. While not as strong as the last episode, this 7th episode is still able to be better than most episodes of the season, which kinda goes to say the overall quality of this season. But in any case, this episode pretty much has ups and lows, but let's start with the ups.
Why don't you go rock out inside the TLC?
This was the first episode where Tennis Ball started to actually become great. Before this episode came out, Tennis Ball was on a very rough spot, being heavily criticized for being just a golf ball follower, and not being that interesting in episodes like Depot 5. But luckily this episode actually had an amazing plot for Tennis Ball, which is him trying to get Ruby's Yoil Light by getting Fury and Gelatin join Free Smart's team to get it. This was an absolute smart move from Tennis Ball, since he knew that switching would have most likely resulted in his demise, kinda like what happened to a certain someone else on the next episode. Not to mention that he was great with Golf Ball as well. When he explained that Yoil Light was involved and the two of them starting gushing about it was so cute that it reminded me that Golf Ball and Tennis Ball actually can have a really cool dynamic if used properly. We need more of this, people. So props to Tennis Ball for actually thinking on his own and being great overall for this episode. Another really cool thing about this episode was the whole plot about Free Smart not knowing about the challenge, which is something that's never been done in the series from what I remember, so that's an interesting concept that could be explored in seasons like Depot as well. Not to mention that it was really fun to see Gelatin and Fury mess with Free Smart by making them do the wrong challenge during all of this episode. Another great thing is Ruby's humor. She really had amazing one-liners in this episode, which definitely made me remember why I like Ruby as much as I do. Now for the bad things. First off, they neutralized Evil Leafy once again. God damn it guys, stop removing her and re-adding her, just let her stay and be cool. Another thing about this episode that I really don't like is something I foreshadowed on my BFDI episodes ranking video as well.
No one wears non-slip shoes so hot anymore.
Oh my gosh, they don't know anything. Purple.
Racist! Get this guy out of here.
Don't worry though, this was just a funny joke. It's not like that's gonna become part of his personality, right guys? Right? Yeah, this is the episode where Yellowface literally becomes racist. It would have been a cool reference if it stopped at just that moment at the cake at stake scene. But the fact that Yellowface kidnapped Bommy, killed him, and turned him into a grape juice, yeah, I really don't like it. Especially since people can now just say that BFDI has a literal and canon racist character. I don't think that's something to flex about. Anyways, another thing that I didn't really like was the final choice for the new elimination place. The first season had the very iconic tiny loser chamber, BFB had the exit, and Teapot's elimination area seems to be the hotel but upside down, which is an interesting elimination place in my opinion. And then there's BFDIA. They did reuse the DLC idea, which I guess is fair, but this episode was the perfect excuse to have this season stand out more by having a very iconic elimination place. But the final results of the two teams that did make a loser chamber were really disappointing. And yes, even Wobunch's elimination chamber doesn't work at all, especially since that can contain just one person and no more than that. Plus it looks just a bit too painful. I may hate Rocky with all my being, but even I think that this is too much for the little guy. Oh, and speaking of that, there's something I gotta address first. I may have already stated in the past that this season continuing didn't really make a lot of sense, especially since there are moments in future episodes that literally state that BFDIA was cancelled. But even with those obvious plot holes, I gotta address that these two episodes actually did an amazing job at keeping intact the timeline. Sure, the season continuing was doomed to ruin the timeline with plot holes to the get-go, but that doesn't mean they should just not care and do whatever the hell they want to do. And these two episodes did a really good job at keeping that momentum, especially the 7th episode, with trapping TV on the DLC, since he was nowhere to be seen in the 3rd season. So that's a plus that these two episodes have. But anyways, overall this episode has a good balance of flaws and good things about it, more leading to the positives, so it gets a 7 out of 10. Jesus Christ, this episode has way too many flaws for me to count. Yeah, I did already state previously in posts and other videos that I never really liked BFDI 8, and for good reasons too. But before I can completely destroy this episode, let's be nice to it first and say the positives. First of all, the elimination was nice, as I do think that none of Free Smart should be eliminated just yet, so Fury being eliminated instead was probably the best move, especially since he already won a season. Another positive is that Ice Cube once again proved to be a really smart person, winning for Free Smart once again. And finally, despite Pin kinda creating a plot hole by doing this, I do actually like that they're trying to redeem Spongy in the eyes of the viewers, who is still healing ever since his first elimination in BFB, so I'm really glad that he, Pin and Coiny are entering a possible storyline. And yeah, that's literally everything I like about this episode. Let's talk about the flaws. To have things be in order, I'm gonna talk about each problem of this episode in order, starting with the opening scene of the episode. Is it just me, or is this like a really awful opening scene? Like, I honestly might consider this the worst opening of the entire series. It just feels so off. I can't really put my finger on it, but there's something about the idea of the opening, the sound effects used, and even the music, that all combine into making this god-awful opening scene. The next thing is Lewis himself. Yeah, I didn't mention him last episode, mostly because he isn't actually relevant in the episode, as he clearly shouldn't. But with how Lewis was shown in this episode, it made so many people go and praise Lewis whenever I saw people talk about the series, to the point where it's just annoying to hear anyone say that Lewis is peak or whatever. They're definitely joking when they say that, but nonetheless it still becomes so annoying to me to the point where I just outright hate Lewis for it, especially when there's way better David clones that deserve that praise way more than Lewis. And speaking of which, let me show you an example. Everyone, here's Johnson, from BFDI Mania. Seriously. If you ever thought that David was a very lazy character that didn't do much, then Johnson is the best option for you. During these 7 minutes of competition, Johnson is able to be not only 100 times better than Lewis, but even 10 times better than the actual David, at least in terms of how they all play the game. Johnson actually shows emotions and ideas on how to win. It's great. So yeah, if you have to get hyped over a David clone, Johnson is the real chat of them all, even more so than David himself, and definitely than Lewis. The next problem I have with this episode is the fact that FreeSmart literally goes back to the Greenlands to get to the Eiffel Tower. I have several problems with this, but the biggest one being, why the fuck are you going back to Goiki? Pencil herself said that she would hate to be away from the recovery center back in episode 6, and yet here she is doing all those miles to get back to the Club of Awesomeness, not to mention that they literally go across the Goiki Canal, and not die a single time, when they literally died so many times back in episode 5 to get across the canal. It just removes the tension that the previous episodes had. I also really hate how casually fast they get back to Goiki, like what the fuck was that? We had a literal 5-part special episode to get to Yoil City, and here you are doing 40 minutes of adventure, done in just under 20 seconds. And wanna know the worst thing? This could have actually worked, because this deleted scene literally solved the Club of Awesomeness issue in a much better way.
Oh, Matry, we need to get the Clubhouse of Awesomeness! But that's atop the Eiffel Tower, which is 2,763 miles away!
Book, the Eiffel Tower's magnetic, right?
Well, yes.
Aha!
This house looks appropriate. What do you think?
Yes, it's perfect. Not too big, not too big. Whatever, it wasn't my first choice anyway.
Bringing the Eiffel Tower to Yoil City with a FreeSmart Supervan magnet was a much better idea than to literally get back to Goiki. The answer is literally there, and yet they decided to do something that basically ruined the entire 5th episode of the season. Yet another thing I want to mention is that this episode might have actually ditched Yoil City for good. Of course we don't know if this was a one-off challenge in Goiki, and maybe the cast will go back to Yoil City next episode.
Oh, what the fuck?
The green lines of Goiki were never that interesting to look at, so ditching the literal best location of the series for the most bland and unoriginal location is really not a good move. Yoil City is more vibrant, more mysterious, and even more appealing to look at. So I really hope that they'll be back to Yoil City by next episode. The next couple of complaints aren't as big as Lewis and going back to Goiki, but I still feel like this is something that should be noted. First off, we see now that Fury Speaker Box can host the season anymore, so FreeSmart decides to get Puffball Speaker Box back. I don't have a big problem with this, as this will definitely get Puffball Speaker Box more screen time, but then you think about it, and we have yet to reach 4 episodes in this season with the same host. I just think that's like, really sad. Then after Puffball Speaker Box is back hosting, FreeSmart chooses the next contest, with just them around, so the other teams don't know anything about the challenge, which was literally the plot line that FreeSmart had last episode, and now that's completely ignored here. Okay, cool. I guess you no longer have to be there to know what the contest is. That's once again another cool concept that was literally introduced last episode, now also thrown out the window. After that there's Yellowface's racist moments, which still continues. Honestly, I'm feeling very sad for all Yellowface fans out there. He's being ruined both in this season and Teapot as well. despite me really liking him in Teapot, but that's for another time. Right after that, we've met with plot holes as well, such as a conveniently placed recovery center here in the tower, despite the fact that the only recovery center of this season is currently stuck in Yoil City. And the fact that Pencil herself said that the only recovery center was that one makes this worse, because Pencil herself is very familiar with the Eiffel Tower, considering the Club of Awesomeness is there, so she would have probably noticed that this new French recovery center is here, but we never saw something like that, so that sucks. Next problem is after Team No Name dies in that car crash, that itself isn't the problem, but it's the fact that Free Smart still has the need to get more paint, despite Team No Name literally being dead last. That's the second time one of the two opposing teams were perfectly capable of winning the challenge against Team No Name, but decided to keep going or even do something stupid.
And it really just feels like you guys are causing all the problems here. Just leave Gargamel to his own devices and you'll all be perfectly safe.
And finally, after all these problems with this episode, the final problem with this episode is just this entire scene.
Boop. 1 hour is up. Let's see how much of the Eiffel Tower is colored each color. 70% is pink, which means Free Smart is the first team safe. Hooray! The team in second place is, well, let's see.
I don't like where this is going.
Hey, Puffbo Speaker Box, want to wear these trendy new sunnies?
Stop!
Sure. Wow, I look so fashionable.
Stop!
Anyway, the team in second place is, well, let's take another look at what we've got.
No.
Okay, I see a whole ton of pink, a little bit of green, but I see no purple at all.
Please, lady, you don't understand.
Which means Team No Name gets second place.
You don't know what you're doing here.
But whoa, Bunch, what happened? You didn't get a single drop of purple paint on the tower. Pathetic. Which means that Whoa Bunch is up for elimination.
As I've already said in the past, it's perfectly cool to have Woe Bunch lose here. Hell, I was hoping they would lose, but please don't make them lose unfairly. It just makes the loss feel unwarranted and unfair, because now I'm pissed that Team No Name was safe, because they literally failed the challenge. This may not be the worst episode of the season, but it's absolutely deserving of a 3 out of 10 in my eyes. It's just an episode with way too many flaws to counter the good parts of this episode. If BFDIA had more positives than flaws, and BFDIA had more negatives than pros, then BFDIA has an even amount of positives and negatives overall. First, with the positives, the fact that Yoilite can actually partially save your spirit when you die is not only a pretty cool fact, but it also explains why Tennis Ball was so desperate to get this thing. If this rock can save you from being completely gone after dying, I'd also want to get my hands on that thing. I also found the way Purple Face was trapped inside the metal box to be overall not that bad, plus at least we now know how he canonically got inside it, so that's nice. Next is the entire Yellow Face elimination and death.
I've definitely resolved everything.
Yellowface has been absolutely obnoxious with his racist remarks in these last 2 episodes, so I'm glad that they depicted his elimination more like a video game boss defeat scene. And speaking of that scene, I really like how brutal it is, which reminds me of other brutal deaths that the season had before. Really good touch. The next good thing about the episode is the challenge itself, even if it was rigged to be the only option, which I found to be interesting. But anyways, the challenge was really creative, which led to most of the episode to be quite enjoyable, while also giving us the best scene of the episode. The references in this little montage definitely gave me a good vibe of nostalgia that the new episodes of the season definitely needed, so that's great. I also found Tennis Ball's arc about feeling not as good as Golf Ball to be really good. I always thought that Tennis Ball needed something like this, especially since Golf Ball's always been able to make the better inventions in the series, so him feeling like he isn't as good as Golf Ball definitely feels in character. Man, Tennis Ball has finally started to get better since Depot 5, and I'm all here for it. And finally, I really like many of the references that the episodes had in it, especially non-existies, mostly because I find it kinda funny how Nickel is the character that's been the most connected to non-existie in the series, possibly referencing non-existie and Nickel's friendship in Inanimate Insanity. And speaking of which, non-existie is so cool in Inanimate Insanity, just listen to his voice.
Thank God non-existie.
No problem.
Makes me wish that non-existie was an actual character in the BFDI series, but oh well. Now on to the negatives, starting with the worst offender of them all. We have the Eiffel Tower being destroyed in this episode. Something that I've noticed with these last two episodes is that, I don't know if it's just me, but it seems like they're trying to remove everything that made this season unique. First they ditched the oil city for good, as this episode confirms, going back to the boring looking green lands of Goiki, and now they go and destroy one of the most unique buildings that the season had going for it, that was in Goiki. I feel like they're trying to look more and more like this is the first season, but again. And like, yeah, of course it is, the title of the season literally says that it's Battle for Dream Island, but again. But at the same time, do you really want the season to just be a copy of the first season? Why not do different things to make it stand out more? I'm just saying that the season would be 10 times better if simple changes were made here and there to make the season stand out more than the other seasons, since this season desperately needs unique things to make it not look like a cheap copy of the first season. But because of certain choices the season takes, it just damages the season more and more, to the point where almost every unique and cool thing about it are just not there anymore, thus making the season overall less enjoyable, at least in my opinion. Oh, and to add salt to the injury, it baffles me how little Free Smart actually cared about the Eiffel Tower, like the Club of Awesomeness was literally the Free Smart house. How they could have used the magnet to get the Eiffel Tower in Oil City for the 6th episode, which would have resulted in the gang never having to get back to Goiki. But no, the Eiffel Tower in the Club of Awesomeness gets destroyed here, and it gets exactly one line about it by Ruby.
By the way, I'm devastated we lost the Clubhouse of Awesomeness!
It feels like this was a line that was thrown in last second, because none of Free Smart actually reacted to the Club of Awesomeness being destroyed, so they just added this line here, which just feels sour and like an afterthought. The next negative is the entire hell scenes that this show has. Well, I do like the fact that this basically confirms that there's hell in this universe, which, well, yeah, it's a cool detail. What I don't like about these scenes is just how uncanny they are. Especially since they remind me of that one object show that I watched when I was a kid, the show being called Objectopose. I remember watching that object show at a young age, and being terrified of that 3D human girl. She just looked so creepy. I think this is also why I don't really like 3D animations that much now. And finally, I do have a feeling that they were trying to set up Golf Ball to be eliminated. They put her on that tree for 3 episodes straight, not being able to do much when stuck there, and when she's finally freed she wasn't even able to do well in the challenge itself, immediately getting crushed. I really hope that she's not getting eliminated in the next episode, because this might be just as unfair as Tear. Damn it, remember what you said. But yeah, overall this episode has both flaws and positives, but unlike the last 2 episodes, there's no winner regarding which one of the two had more. There's some negatives, and there's some positives. So it just makes sense for this episode to get a 5 out of 10. It's definitely an improvement over last episode, so hopefully the next episode will be even better than this one. And once again, that's every episode from BFDIA. Just like last time, I will now rank every episode from worst to best. Hold on people. We're not done just yet. Considering IDFB currently has just 1 episode, I might as well cover it up alongside BFDIA in this video right here, so let's talk about this 3rd season. BFDI+IDFB is a weird season to talk about, not only because there's only one episode of the season, but also because it's the only season of the series that isn't competition-wise. Taking place after BFDI getting cancelled, or I guess now after that season ended, we see the remaining contestants that survived until the 5th episode all hang out in Yoil City, that being their home for the time being. There isn't too much to talk about this first episode, especially since we don't know what even the purpose of this season is, but from the ending we can guess that it has to do with getting everyone out from the tiny loser chamber, which would later make sense since everyone is seen free in BFB. So what I think this season was gonna be, is that each episode would have taken someone out from the chamber, and that episode would be dedicated to that character, finally free and ready to either meet or re-encounter the rest of the cast in this new place that they all now call home. If this was all that this season was, it would have been a simple 6 out of 10 or something around that, as the idea is pretty unique. But that's not everything that this episode has to offer to us. Mostly because this season seems to be taking itself very seriously, sometimes that is. There's quite a lot of hints in the episode that show us that there's something mysterious about this entire Yoil City. Like, remember when I said earlier that it's odd that no one lives in Yoil City anymore? Well, the intro of this season manages to tell us something that might have happened to the citizens of this city, while also giving us a banger song for the intro. You can see some alien ships leaving the city in the reflection of the water during the intro, hinting that everyone from the city left through some alien ships. And even more to that, there's even a little bit of lore dedicated to Golf Ball herself, as we see in this scene right here.
Where are you, Bozo? You need punishment. You can't hide forever, Bozo.
Golf ball! Snap out of it! Jeez, that's the second weird episode you've had since we entered this building. Stay focused.
No, we need to leave.
Golf ball, we haven't even seen 10% of the gadgets yet.
Listen, I don't know why, but we have to go now.
That is the first time I've ever seen you make a decision irrationally. But if you insist.
Seems like Golf Ball has had at the very least 2 encounters like this one, as Tennis Ball said. There's also to mention the little appearance of evil Leafy once Tennis Ball took the wall teleporter, teasing at her being still around despite everything. Although there's not much to talk about this episode overall, because for the most part, it's just the contestants hanging out with each other, but the ideas on where this season could potentially lead to are immense. So overall, I'm gonna give this first episode of this season an 8 out of 10. Alright, now that we actually covered everything from season 2 and 3, we can finally rank all these episodes together from worst to best. So let's do this.